Not sure which way. I'm Christina Sorrento. I'm the chief of the Intake and Regulatory Coordination Division, and this is the DRC meeting for Lowlands Plaza. Your lead reviewer is Tamika Graham, who is working on pulling up the plans. Tamika will just highlight any of the major issues that you might be aware of or should be aware of, and then it's really your meeting to ask any questions you have based upon the comments you received. Once Tamika has the plan up, we can get started.
Thank you.
I will say, I think this is the fullest DRC we've had in person in a long time, so.
Well, while she's pulling it up, just a preview, we want to talk primarily about phasing, and then that ties in with transportation issues, Rebecca, that there seem to be a lot of comments on that, and then some design issues too. There's a long list here, but it's just a sketch plan, so we don't have to chase everything down to the ends. Agreed.
Do you want to introduce the development team?
Oh, sure. Okay. Those of you know me, I'm Bob Harris, lawyer.
I'm Andy Brown, Stanford Properties, working with the Rosenfeld Investments and Willard on this, and also on the Jefferson project. Some of you have recognized me from that, so back again.
Carol Twitmeyer with MV&A. I'm a planner architect.
Michael Magnarelli, work with Willard Retail, working with Andy.
Andy Bradshaw, Johnson Burnett Associates, civil engineer.
Hallie Johnson, environmental planner.
Richard Brockmeyer, transportation planner.
Tola Sharma, urban design.
Natasha Fahim, urban designer.
Matt Folden, I'm the regulatory supervisor from the county.
That's okay. I already introduced myself, so.
Rebecca Torman, DOT, development review.
And Robert Cronenberg, I'm deputy director here at planning.
Again, Tamika Graham.
Harry Sanders, Mid-County Division.
I think before we get into some of the questions that you wanted to talk about regarding phasing and transportation, we just wanted to first say thank you for incorporating some of the comments that were provided to your team at the time of your pre-submission meeting with our team. So we do acknowledge some of those items that have been incorporated, but we also wanted to give you a bit of a preview for some of the major issues that we think we need to work out, and then also things that will likely carry over into our
Site plan?
We'll carry over to the site plan, but I'm just thinking about the next meeting that will carry over to our work session. I think one of the things that we should talk about first is the site layout and like the street grid, some of the major transportation issues. I think one of the first things that a lot of people think about with this site, and one I should say, we're all really excited for this project to be in, and the transformation that it's proposed. But we all think about the sweeping curve here at where Park Lawn Drive and Randolph Road intersect. One of the major recommendations that you probably all saw in the master plan is squaring off that corner. And so we know that that improvement won't be a part of your project, but we think that it's really important for you to put together a concept that will show that corner squaring off, because it will really change things substantially. Just having a secondary drawing where we can see how that realignment would impact the townhomes and that park is really important. And again, that's just a major master plan item that we just need to talk about and address. A couple of questions that we had, like with public-private streets, don't think that was quite clear. You can probably walk us through that. Some other obvious things that I think a lot of reviewers, also from MCDOT, pointed out is the issue with the intersection of Park Lawn Drive and, is that Longstone Way, where you have that really weird curve. You probably already saw a number of the comments about site distance issues. One of our recommendations is to close off that access point in the interim, provided future dedication. So when the time is right for that intersection to be squared off, we can have the appropriate measures in place to do that. A couple of other things with that. There are some issues with the parking. You have 3 different phases. Some of the earlier phases still show non-compliance with the zoning code in terms of parking between the building and the street. So that will have to be addressed. We made some recommendations for how you can incorporate that into your open space. Another issue that I think we'll need to talk about in that follow-up meeting is the proposed Warner. Shared streets can be a really good thing when they're designed appropriately, and right now we really don't support having that building over the shared street. Again, I think that's probably another meeting that we could talk more about that. But again, just flagging some of our major issues. Moving on from there, the master plan also talks about the potential school site and the potential, the evaluation of the school site or to make a contribution for a school or park. Again, major master plan issue. The open space, I guess tying in also with the squaring off of that corner, it does have a minimum acreage that is required per the master plan, which is not being met at this point. So that's something that needs to be addressed. In terms of ownership, it is expected to be privately owned based on Parks assessment. We also, along with our drawings that we provided with some suggestions for how you might be able to reconfigure the site layout, we also dovetailed in some comments about the open space and how it could potentially be interconnected. Right now, just have a lot of spaces which are currently labeled as common open space, whereas you do have a public open space requirement that is not clear how you're addressing that. So another major issue. The noise analysis will need to be submitted. And then, of course, because this is a sketch plan, you're proposing public benefit points. The calculations need to be explicitly provided to staff so that we can evaluate them. We understand that you do have that 100-point minimum and you are just at the cusp, but we typically see projects in this area go a little bit beyond the bare minimum. And so we did make some suggestions to your team for how you could creatively increase the amount of public benefits. And in terms of phasing and the amount of units that you're providing in the first phase, we would want to talk about, as much public benefits that can be delivered within that first phase. And I guess another point, a major point to highlight is the utilities. We will be requiring this development to underground the existing utilities within and along the site frontage. So there are, of course, a number of issues that we need to talk about, but just try to highlight some of the major ones that we think will require some additional meetings to talk about.
So before we get into the substance, because this is a long and deep list, the process now is that this team allocates time next Tuesday, I think, as a follow-up. We would like to absolutely reserve a reasonable amount of that time so we can get back together, because we're clearly not going to cover everything today.
Okay.
So
when we get towards the end of this session, I just need to know the items we still need to address so I know who needs to be in that room.
fine. Okay. I'm sorry, Andy.
No, that's okay.
Sure.
Just a clarification on the plan for the redo of the intersection of Park Lawn and Randolph. I think what we were anticipating was creating a separate sort of inset showing how that phase 3 could be developed if that intersection, if it's imminent, if the redevelopment of that is imminent. Is that kind of what you have in mind, like an either or?
Yes.
Okay, so that's
Yeah.
what we were talking about yesterday. So we can
Okay.
certainly do that.
Same
Yeah,
page.
we certainly do. Should we talk about the non-conforming parking and the phasing? I mean, it all sort of ties in terms of the request for undergrounding utilities. And I think there was a comment about completing all the Randolph Road improvements kind of in the first phase, which also dovetails with the parking requirement for the retail. You know, it really is important that this project be phased and that the requirements for public improvements and the like go phase by phase. We can't front end all the improvements for the project in the first phase. It doesn't carry that. And the middle of the project where where we hope to introduce the grocery store, obviously, that's an operating shopping center. So we need to preserve as much of the retail look and feel as we can in that interim stage. So Bob, I don't know if you want to jump in about sort of phasing requirements and how that would work,
Yeah.
but.
Well, pull up, that's useful there. The top one, as you see, there are existing buildings in what we're calling phases 2 and 3 that are going to be there for an indefinite period of time. The near term only includes phase 1, which is phase 1A new development, and phase 1B repurposing that central portion for a grocer. And so the other retail, the pad site that's out there towards Randolph Road will remain. It's an important service both to the owner and to the community. So we need that to remain. So that limits what we can do physically on that 2/3 of the site, let's call it, but it also is a constraint financially. And so irrespective of what improvements you want along Randolph Road or elsewhere, we are going to be seeking to phase them with, block or a third of the block, the second third of the block, and a third of the block, if you will. So I don't think that's unreasonable. It's, that we see that happen in many projects, and I hope that will be okay with you. We'll come up with more of a detailed phasing plan to show you what we're doing in terms of public improvements each phase, but it pretty much has to be that way.
And one example of how we can't make too many revisions to the existing retail, the service area for that retail pad is between the pad and Lauderdale Drive. And I know one of the drawings showed an open space back there. We're not reconfiguring that building. Those tenants are remaining. So that area needs to be accessible to trucks and cars and the like for service purposes. So.
Andy, the front of that retail, is it on the right side or left side?
It's actually has 3 tenants, right? So
Yeah,
it
right.
has
It's
3
a
sides.
multi-tenant building, right?
It has 3 sides, and that one side on the right,
Is
on
the-
the east side,
is
is
the service
the
area.
service, the trash and deliveries and so on. So the trucks need to get up to that side
Into the back.
in order to make that building function.
So there's multiple things here, right? So we're asking you to do these things because of different reasons.
Mhm.
There are pedestrian safety concerns, which are primary, like having that hot ride and things like that, which
Yeah.
we don't see how you could have a new development with a lot more traffic and pedestrian traffic, with people living on the site and still continue to operate those conditions. So there's pedestrian safety priorities that are driving some of those improvements. Then there's the discussion around the utilities, which is a sector plan sort of requirement.
And we do have at least 3 projects that we've required the pedestrian improvements and bicycle improvements and frontage improvements to be done with the first phase of development. So that's not on precedent.
So, and then there's the third piece of it, which is the open space discussion, which I think we were recommending that because we couldn't find adequate conformance the way the common open space was stated, it wasn't clear where the public open spaces, where the common open spaces. Some of the common open spaces in phase 3 were really buried deep within the blocks, which is why I think Natasha had shared some thoughts and ideas. So this is like a bit of an onion that we have to peel together. But please know that our priorities we're coming at it from different angles, and pedestrian and cyclist sort of safety is very important. And then the utilities and the open space discussions are, I think, two other prongs. So when you propose what you want to propose, Bob, we would urge that you think around those three priorities and see how you guys can phase things the way you are proposing to phase things.
Okay, and I understand your objectives and don't disagree with the principles. I think sometimes we both have to work together to recognize that principles sometimes run into conflicts with, a variety of other objectives, so.
And these are public streets on the edges, so DOT is going to have to be a very important voice in that discussion.
So speaking of.
Hey everyone, this is Michael Majestic, and sorry I can't be there in person, but I wanted to just jump in for some clarification on this retail pad. Just so I'm hearing this correctly, I know that I understand that it's out of conformance if we were to have built that building as it's drawn today, but as we know, it's an existing building, and just kind of want to bring home the point that the existing leases do preclude certain things, like removal of a loading area and removal of parking. So I just want to make sure that I completely appreciate the positions that staff is taking, and we can address some of the open space and pedestrian connectivity concerns in other ways, hopefully, than what was suggested. But I just want to make sure that we're not putting ourselves on a path where that's going to be a requirement to make that building come into conformance with current zoning in order to move this thing forward, because it's really out of our hands and our ability to do that.
And along with Michael's point, that the zoning ordinance does recognize the right to continue certain non-conforming structures and even uses. And so you appreciate the tension there, and we recognize what you're trying to do. So please, let's work together on it.
So which streets are you thinking are public versus private? Did you think about that, or?
I think Macon Road is private because it needs to continue to service. Again, that's a road that would be constructed in phases, because in the interim phase, it needs to service the rear of the grocery store as it does currently. So I think, and Michael, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it would be a private road at least until such time as the connection to Park Lawn is made. That's how we envision it?
If it's only private, if it's private, it will never be public.
Even if it's built to public road standards, which of course it has to be.
Yeah, so.
Sorry, Andy, I don't think there will ever be a public road that, we're going to talk about the Woonurf, but there will never be a public road that goes underneath the building, so that will certainly remain private.
We're talking about Macon.
Talking about Macon at the moment, behind the
Oh,
shopping
I see,
center.
Macon. Yep.
So,
Yep.
Macon can be, I think, my personal opinion is that it can be phased, so you could, because it connects to a public road, so we need it to be public. And then the other side connects to a public road. So I think that if you parcel it out, I mean, that's what I think so those two sections can become public because they do connect to a public roadway.
Okay. And then what about the center section of that?
So the center one, which is the one on the right, I think that can be public as well, but you show it in the first phase of development. And what we want you to do is remove that hot right, that little island, and make the road and build it when you build. So if you're building those townhouses on the right, we'd want you to build that to public road standards and have it turned over because it would connect to Macon Road. And
You're talking about an entry road now. Okay.
Yeah.
We were talking about
That's
Macon,
water
but now you're talking
yeah,
about.
sorry. So Macon, I think Macon definitely can be public. I think that would be my thought is, and then the middle section, when you're ready to redo the middle section, it could come in. So like, obviously you have a retail because it does connect to two public roadways or,
It's
So-
okay that it gets interrupted. It's basically a dead end or it stops.
It's not a dead end. I mean, I would think that you'd have to provide some kind of like, well, I'm not sure, some kind of easement potentially for the vehicles. Or it might, I'm not sure exactly. Maybe there's a maintenance liability until it gets turned over.
Yeah, we really don't want people driving through behind the loading dock area, especially as a grocery store and, several
You have,
large trucks that are going to be.
right, but I mean, it's similar to, I mean, it dead ends into a loading dock, I guess.
Well, it doesn't really dead end though,
I mean, it's
because
a
it turns
service.
It doesn't
into,
actually go through,
it intersects with Lauderdale.
Well, I think she means beyond Lauderdale.
Beyond Lauderdale.
Yeah, but that's the
Stop it.
later phase,
Yeah.
it seems to
Well,
me.
right now it's open through, but it's the back of the shopping center, so it's not, people don't, they only drive back there by mistake.
Yeah.
We wouldn't be, we wouldn't want that traffic to increase significantly beyond Lauderdale.
But stopping at Lauderdale and having the ability to turn at Lauderdale and go out, or having that connection to connect back to Randolph. So now you are connecting to two different public streets.
In phase one, I mean, Bacon could be built as a public road,
Uh-huh,
and Lauderdale could be built as a public
Okay.
road.
Yeah.
So that works. Then you do phase three, and you build that section of Macon to a public road, and when you come back into the grocery store phase, then that's the last piece. Rebecca, that's what you're suggesting,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
okay,
yeah, that works.
yeah, all right, I think we're on the same page
We
there.
probably
then.
wouldn't-
Sorry, just to clarify, wouldn't Lauderdale just be like one half of it built to a public road standard?
Cannot build a half road. So you'd have to build Lauderdale to a full, complete section.
Where,
Yeah, that's.
yeah, I think that might be.
We're
that
just
might be
looking at the,
problematic.
I'm sorry, we're just looking at the pavement section, like so
drive itself.
the drive aisle, yeah. So you can build, if you can build that, we could accept that and then do it in another phase.
Okay.
That includes removing the hot rate as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the hot rate needs to,
Yeah, let's talk about that a minute. I
Yeah,
totally understand where you're coming from on that, but what this plan doesn't show is the significance of that undertaking. There are signal poles there, and other utilities there. And the lane usage is offset. The island is basically into the southbound lane of Lauderdale. So, it's not just closing it off, it's completely removing that island and moving the curb over there, et cetera, all of which then impacts the existing tenants there. So despite recognizing the dislike for hot rights, and understandably so, until we develop that phase, it's really a major challenge to do that. And it's existed like that for many years. So I don't think that it's unsafe.
we don't like them. We asked for all of them to be removed. We have had one that I have, that Andy's worked on, that I've gotten hit over the head with. So we are going to continue to ask for that at this point.
Are there other mediations or strategies for slowing the traffic on the hot right
For this interim,
or this
phase,
interim stage?
additional traffic. calming
You can
back.
propose something and we'll consider it, but I don't know of anything specifically to tell you.
Maybe
Yeah, I
a
just want to
raised
comment on that a little
crosswalk
bit.
table.
Because as you come into the site, it's going to be a much more urban condition for at least that first third. So, the hot right is going to be an issue for us. So if it keeps coming back in, we'll keep making the comment.
Before we move too far away from Macon Road, we do have some questions about interparcel connections, and we would like to see, the potential for southbound connections shown as well.
To the property south of us.
From
you're saying.
Lauderdale, for the,
Oh, to connect to the property south, the
Yeah.
condo.
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think that's necessarily a problem. I mean, I don't see anything happening there anytime soon. It's a condominium building. And so to get those unit owners to agree to any change is Yeah, well, I'll be long gone, I'm confident.
But you're looking for something
So-
on the plan that says a reservation or an
We can
easement.
reserve that,
easement.
yeah, right. I don't think that's a problem.
No, I don't either.
And we recognize that Putnam has a lot of grade and
Good point.
stormwater, so that's not gonna work there.
Yeah.
But these other two streets, just like you're extending the street grid, when and if they come in, we want them to do the same thing. And in the long term, it'll serve your project better because you'll have more access.
Just to state the obvious, we can't do anything on their property.
Yeah.
But we can make allowances in our plan.
Provide an easement.
Yeah.
Yeah, that Putnam Macon intersection is going to be interesting to really,
There are a lot of
we
challenges.
haven't quite figured that one out yet.
We appreciate the connection, because that was another big issue of the fact that it's an L connection right now.
And keep in mind, the community is keeping an eye on us as they did on that other project there. So you'll hear as much from them, I suspect, as well as on what happens on Putnam.
Did you say your team wanted to talk a little bit more about the Warner? Is that on your?
What's our priority?
I don't think that's a priority now.
Yeah,
The,
that
will remain private, so.
yeah.
yeah.
There's no question.
Yeah, that's our plan, yeah.
I guess do you want to talk about the connection, Park Lawn, the stone easement?
Longstone.
The long-stone
Yeah,
connection over. to
I mean,
Park
I
Lawn.
think that's
That's a given, yes?
that curvature, that's a problem. So we recognize that. I don't think.
So we.
Yeah, we only showed this connection because you had talked
Yeah,
about
you had
that
asked us
before,
to
but
do it.
we wouldn't really build it this way.
We did it.
Yeah.
Well, and
It
we
does-
still think there's
No, we still-
there's a future here where that street connects through.
Yeah.
The one thing I would say is that when you show the easement, it really should be
Straight.
straightened and connecting
Okay.
to a rectilinear street grid and not the curve, because if the
Right.
curve stays, that's not correct.
Absolutely. And we needed to show that perpendicular connection, otherwise it's not a legal connection
Yeah.
at all. So yes, that's not an issue. We can reconfigure that and be able to show the full Longstone section as an easement.
And we appreciated your recognition in the comments that it's not going to be our obligation to abandon that road and reconstruct it. That, would kill the whole project, obviously. But we can certainly provide for that opportunity. As Andy said, even show a plan in concept of how it would be done.
I'd like to talk about the phase one building layout. I think that's
Oh, yeah.
important. We've it's several comments about the length of the townhome sticks here. And you're going to state it much better than I am. But essentially, we feel like this is an urban project, and what we're proposing on phase 2 or phase 3, the middle section is a multifamily building with exactly the same sort of building frontage that we're showing with the townhouse blocks. This isn't a suburban site. I don't think we want to have, sight lines through. We don't want it to look like we don't want it to look more like an urban project.
We want to maintain the street block, the street face. These buildings are going to have a sprinkler system, just like a multifamily building would. They are rental projects. This is not a condo situation. So we do feel that the 9 rows, the 9 units in a row is shorter than in many of the multifamily buildings.
Yeah.
And so providing the space between there seems a little suburban for an
Right.
urban condition.
And there's no fire access issue at all because
Yeah.
they're served by public roads on the sides and there's access to the middle. It hasn't been an issue with
Yeah,
our
we're
marshal.
working through those
working through those
issues
authorities.
with fire
Yes,
department, and
yes.
so far, what we have proposed with fire department is workable.
I
So,
see. Because I noticed on the southern portion, it's 912.
Yes, it's more than
Yeah,
nine.
It's
Yeah.
more than that.
Yeah.
it's the full width, it's just like the building.
Just like the building to its
next door
left.
To the left. It is a full block width of facade. These are 4-story units as well.
Well,
But they are individual townhomes.
No,
Are they
well-
connected from inside?
they even have less density of occupation than the multifamily building does, because that's a 7-story building and these are 4-story with individual units. They will have individual stoops coming out onto the street. We've intentionally set ourselves back 5 additional feet so that we could do that, individual stoops. But it doesn't seem any different, from a multifamily building or from a street front position.
So do they have party walls or no? Just trying to.
They're all fire rated between, yes.
So
but it's
they
when you
are
treat it-
for rent townhouses.
Yes.
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
What she's just saying is, though, from a building massing standpoint, it appears to be more like a multifamily building. In fact, I've seen some multifamily buildings where they do have stoops out to the street, and the unit is 2 stories there, but it's a multifamily building, and they're connected by a corridor interior as well. We're sort of a cross between the two, and definitely do not feel that continuum of frontage is offensive in an urban setting.
So I don't have this section in front of me, but there's a maximum number of units provided in a stick in the development standards in the code.
For
it 12?
townhouses, for owned townhouses, 12.
A lot of this also depends on how the building's designed. Right. So that's a site plan level discussion. I think we can work with you on that, but our goal is here to break down the scale of both the apartment building and the townhouses as much as possible, make them look urban, but have those individual stoops, porches, et cetera, on both sides of that building. So that's another thing we want to make sure, quite often what we've experienced in projects similar to this is that there is a right-of-way dedication at sketch and preliminary plan that gets discussed, and then that sets the build to line, and then when you look at the building design, there's nothing on the ground floor.
Right.
And that will not be an acceptable condition. We are learning better to make these comments earlier on so that everybody knows what the expectation
It
is.
is absolutely an important part of activating the street in a multifamily. And I believe that our townhouses, because they are 4 stories tall, are going to feel more like a multifamily building.
We spent a fair amount of time with
Yes.
design, talking about this very issue, actually. We've gone through precedent images from all over the place, so.
And intentionally, at this point, in both the multifamily and with the individual units, we've set back 5 feet from our build-to line so that we can provide that interim buffer area. It's also for stormwater. We're going to have, bioretention there, but it'll be in combination with stoops, roofs, et cetera. Some, items that are pedestrian scaled, human scaled.
Yeah, we appreciate it. I think one of the comments we asked for is street sections to make sure that there is a space for it provided, so.
Yeah, we want to see if you put something like that in the right of way or how far it's away from the sidewalk. We want to make sure that people don't fall into it. So we need to see those details.
Sure.
At this point.
Is that a segment detail?
Well, I need to see whatever you're doing in the right of way at this point.
Sections, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I know I had some conversations, some questions about the sections that we can probably deal with offline would be pretty easily for us to do, so I'll reach out to them. I know it's Richard's comment.
Deepak's working on it, so.
Okay, I didn't know if it was a Richard comment, so I didn't know.
Yeah,
Which one was gonna be easier, but
Probably me and Deepak.
yep, I'll hit you and Deepak up, no problem.
And it'll be tied to the building heights too, if you're doing like 4-story townhouses, where is their 4th floor? Is it in the front, in the back? Is it the whole floor? Like, we don't know those things yet. So,
Right.
and the other thing I would say is that part of our commentary about breaking up some of this is because it was unclear to us where the common open spaces are versus the public open spaces.
Okay.
If you come and tell us that green muse is a common open space, which can be more private in nature per the code, that's a different type of a space that doesn't need to be more porous and more accessible. But we were not sure what you're counting those as to be.
Sure.
And also we have concerns about some of the places where we think you're going to count public open spaces, such as that carve out along the Woonerf with the buildings that are covering both sides of it. So just note that there's a jar here to be filled with common open space and public open space. and wherever you put public open space, that's got to be very, very public, and be publicly visible, publicly accessible. So, and we may have more comments on the porosity and visual sort of access to that in those areas versus maybe perhaps here if this is a. But a lot of it is site plan level design, but we want to make sure you guys know where we are coming from.
I wanted, this is Paul Mortensen. I wanted to make one comment, and that is that I appreciate the comments on trying to make a very walkable, very urban setting. But you know, townhouses at 4 stories, one is very tall. And I think, frankly, out of scale typically. But if you have very narrow spaces or very narrow alleys or very narrow muses between 4-story townhouses, that scale is almost overwhelming of the building to the space. It should be at least a 1-to-1 ratio of width to height of structures adjacent to it. So that's why I think it's going to be very important to be able to see these sections and to know, you know, what you guys are proposing, because, you know, that starts to get a little overwhelming. That's a little bit more than urban. And, you know, urban means walkable, comfortable, as well as, you know, more dense. So we just want to make sure that that's clear.
I will say, there are a lot of cities that have much taller than 4-story buildings that you would call urban. So I don't know.
Yes, but you know, I agree. And, but we're not creating a city here. We're creating a walkable neighborhood. And I think the scale needs to be appropriate in order to make it the best walkable neighborhood that we can get. I will
say, just kind of as what we are developing, like, these are missing middle. So a typical market rate townhouse is 40, 42, 46 feet deep. These are much shorter.
Yep.
And
yeah,
so
no, I agree.
But I will also say that the 4th level is not a full level. Okay, it's a roof deck in some cases, or most cases, and an additional room. It's really what it is. So
well, I think we'll see all of that in the section. So
yeah, you'll
again,
see all of that
love to see that.
But we are attempting to kind of hit that square footage kind of sweet spot that is where most townhouses now are being built at 2,500, 3,000 square feet.
These are much smaller. Yeah, these are much small. These are in the 1,500 to maximum like 1,800 square foot range. So it's a different product.
It's a more affordable type of townhouse, if you will, just because of the size of it, not because of finishes or any of that, just because of the size of the product. It makes it more affordable.
Yeah,
and I think we commented that we really appreciate the variety of types and sizes. So I think that's a great thing. But again, I just, you know, we just need to make sure that urbanistically it looks good.
Yeah, I have confidence. We will, at site plan, we will.
We have a decent design team. We can replace them if necessary.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just to build off of what Paul was speaking about, I think we support the addition of housing. And we know that this is part of the White Flint 2 sector plan, which was very focused on infill housing and infill development, where we have sort of low density. So we want to make it clear that we do support that. I think it's more like the way that it's designed is kind of the comments that are. Yeah.
Understood.
Atul, I have a question about that courtyard. Is part of the concern about the courtyard by the Wharf, is it the building overhang, the bridges? Does that help it, or does it need to be restructured entirely?
It definitely is an issue. The bridges are not gonna make it feel any more public. You know, so that's one concern. Also, you know, when you treat a regular street with a special treatment, it indicates that there's a change in its nature.
Right.
So I think from a design I'm sorry?
That you want it to be that way.
Right. So, but what we don't want is you come along Longstone and then you have this court, which is completely surrounded by this apartment building with bridges connecting it. So it feels very, very private. So again, you have to provide common open space for the townhouses per the zoning code, which can be a little bit more private, but you have to also provide public open space for the whole site, which has to be much more public. And you guys are right at the 10%. So, and that's why our comments about taking some of the parking and putting a space at the corner, which I know you can't do right now because of the retail tenants, was made because we think that having the space along Randolph or along one of the entry drives would be a much more public place for a public open space to exist rather than right in the middle of this block with, an apartment building kind of engulfing it on all sides.
Yeah. I will say just, and it's not necessarily clear because we're looking at plan, that the little skinny piece that is on the north side of the Wooner, what's called the Wooner, is only a single story. And so that.
Just that on a section.
Right, and in section, so that is, there's going to be more light and more openness in that than it appears in the plan.
No, it's not so much an issue of light and air, Carol, as it is to it not feeling public, right? It's public open space. This is not gonna feel as a publicly accessible, open to all type of a public space. The park on the corner will, for sure.
Let me ask this question. Because there are a lot of buildings that will have bridges across, and the parking for that large multifamily building is at the south side.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any form of connection across at the third level? Because this is a connection at the third level, 25 feet of clearance, that would be acceptable. Could it be a transparent bridge? Could it be a much more narrow section and not the full width of that building in order to connect across? Because that's a really important thing, is to be able to have access to the parking for all of those floors above. It's 7 stories.
Yeah, and we've dealt with this before. I think Natasha could probably talk to it. And, there can be maybe a single story connection at a certain level, maybe 2 stories of a connection. That's literally just a glass corridor.
Yeah.
If it's at just one side versus 2, all those things make a difference in how it relates to then the lower building height and all of that comes into play.
Right.
The issue that we have, which is a fundamental issue with this, is also very, very enclosed, right? It's like right in the middle of the site, in the middle of the block. And this street, Longstone Way, is not going to go through in the near term, right? We're also closing it. So now it's even more private than what this drawing is indicating. So that's where I think our concern is coming from. So
I think a good example of that aerial connection, Bob, is the redevelopment of our old office.
That's what I was just thinking of, exactly right.
Same issue, so I think that was a good resolution.
Yeah.
On site.
In Silver Spring? Yeah, the old headquarters site, Pizzuto's project,
Okay.
yeah.
I'm gonna go look.
there's 2 things here, right? One is that those bars, and the second is where does that open space sit within the block? Right now, it's kind of buried in the middle. Can it be to a corner on one side, or can it be more exposed to one of the streets in a way that makes sense? Can it be pushed closer to rent? So again, this is phase 3. We all know it's not real right now. I mean, I'll just say the obvious. So we are kind of debating about these things when they don't really exist in reality a little bit. So I think we can.
Okay, we're running out of time
Two
here.
minutes left.
Yeah, so clearly we want to talk about the road issues and some of which we haven't even talked about, like the number of connections on Macon, et cetera. So we would need Rebecca and you park and planning people there to talk about those. That includes public-private design of them, layout, et cetera. I think secondly, we want to talk about more site design issues, the open space issues that we're talking about right now, because those seem to be, foundation elements to what else we do. Maybe we don't have to talk about the townhouse design as much there. I think we've gotten useful feedback on that, and I think you are hearing what we're saying at the same time.
Yeah, we need to show some images, which we will.
Yeah.
We'll do.
So we can come back, I'll put them on the line, with a plan that shows the Longstone connection to a squared off Park Lawn Drive and all, and can have that on the table, I think, for the overall discussion. and then, get into the road configuration, et cetera. Is that
Mhm.
pretty much the focus, I think?
So you just need planning and DOT, basically.
I think so, yes.
Yeah.
Unless you all think there's something else we missed that you would like to discuss.
I mean,
I think that's it, like.
there's an underlying assumption that whatever we do works for fire access, so.
Yeah.
we'll just work
Yeah,
with
Yeah,
that.
they seem to
They're
agree,
working
yes.
together, yeah.
And Richard will be our point person for all transportation-related
Okay.
comments from planning side, so he's going to be shepherding us all through that discussion.
Um, Sure, go ahead.
Just going to say, in terms of the overall schedule, if everything is submitted in a timely manner, we have this tentatively scheduled for a September 26th planning board date. That's under the 90-day clock, and so you would have to submit your final plans by August 17th. And for the agencies, the agency letters will be due August 22nd.
We will certainly do our best. We're often the critic about things that aren't taken to the board on time, so we'll do our best. It's a big project, though, so.
Complicated.
All right,
Okay.
thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
For the discussion.
Yes.
So we
I am Christina Sorrento. I am the Chief of the Intake and Regulatory Coordination Division, and this is the DRC meeting for Tregoning property. Your lead reviewer is Jeff Server. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed. Jeff will highlight any of the major issues, and then it's the applicant's meeting to ask some questions you might have. So Jeff, go ahead.
Sure. Hi, good morning, everyone. Before you today is the Tregoning property. This was previously in for a pre-preliminary plan. And so what we have before us today is sort of a continuation of that. We're now into the preliminary plan phase. The layout has stayed the same as it was at the pre-preliminary phase. So most of the comments today, many of which the applicant has already heard. So you've already heard a lot of what we think relative to layout and design. But I'll hit some of the high points on that, and then I'll turn it over for discussion. So the biggest thing at this point, we're comfortable working with the alignment of the road, the extension of Hoffman as provided. So thank you for providing the exhibit showing the alternate layout. What we'd like to try to do is really focus on developing the site and making it the best it can possibly be with the extension of Hoffman as it is shown, which is the same as it was at the pre-preliminary plan stage when we worked through that. The big thing design-wise, I think most of the comments you're going to hear are going to be design-related primarily. The big thing is anytime that there's a street terminating at an intersection or anything of that sort, it would be nice to not have it terminating in a view that is into an alley or into a parking area or something like that, but to actually have it terminating into a view of a home or of a porch or something of that sort. Some way where the views are actually to amenities rather than to pieces that are perhaps not as fun to look at. The other piece of it is really trying to make that over. I guess you've heard this already, but really trying to make that open space area as usable and as wonderful of a space as it can possibly be. Right now, it's still encumbered substantially with stormwater management features. So it really kind of brings to mind what would this space actually look like. And sort of going along with that, the other big piece and a lot of the comments that you receive relative to stormwater management features have to do with trying to not do the boxes that are going to be along the street that in turn might have chances or requirements to have guardrails or anything of that. We've seen this at other developments within the county, and it's always sort of unfortunate when we see how some of these turn out. So we would really like to try to stay away from that as much as possible. And probably the biggest thing is we're still asking to see this block get redeveloped in a way that provides better frontage along Kings Valley Road and then along this proposed Road C, or Public Road C. One suggestion that we have is to actually, rather than having it for the rear loads here, it's great that some of them are, so we're really happy to see that, but perhaps this goes away and there could be a lot placed here that would help to address that comment about terminating views at intersections to a home, but perhaps introducing a parallel alley along here, which would allow them to be rear loaded from both sides. That's just one thought that we've had about that. The other comments, again, this is another from the pre-preliminary phase, but looking at just the overall grading at these areas, particularly on the east and the west of the site, really trying to minimize the amount of uniform grading and try to do the grading as needed. So try to maintain existing features as possible, rather than kind of creating just a uniform slope that just is really sort of oppressive in some respects. So trying to maintain as much of the natural site as possible and just make it look like this development fits within that landscape rather than just sitting on top of it. And the other comments I'm going to leave to transportation to talk about connectivity and circulation and particular sidewalks and street sections and all that. So with that, I'll turn it over.
Sure. Yeah, I think you covered the big points. A lot of it's just some cleanup work, more details, particularly on the grading profile of that connection. We might want to make sure that it does work. Making sure that we have sidewalk on both sides of all streets. Making sure that ramps at intersections run perpendicular to the roads. There should be 8 ramps at each intersection. Get sidewalk, side path, what we're looking for along Kings Valley Road. So that's more of a rustic feature, would allow cyclists to use the facility. Then last, the idea to get, kind of speaking to what Jeff was saying, get a sidewalk connection at the bottom of the site down to the sidewalk on Kings Valley Road. So a lot of that's speaks to the idea of that kind of open space along Kings Valley Road, make that more of a usable space experience, while also providing some additional connectivity. Again, one of our top priorities is building out that connectivity to Kings Valley Park to the south. So whatever we can do to both encourage that movement, as well as, again, make that the on-site experience as good as possible. I know that that we had some comments on reloading units. Did you want to speak about that?
I just did a little bit in terms of reconfiguring this block and trying to provide more rear loaded units.
Okay. Yeah, so just that comment. So whatever we can do to facilitate that with the road network, that's what we want to do. I know that DOT has some comments as well that I'm sure I echo.
Sorry. Deepak is reviewing.
Yeah, this is Deepak here. Most of the comments basically are related to the road layouts. I did not see a vertical profile for the roadways, as well as the horizontal radiuses were not labeled. So I'm not sure if that meets the standards. The other comment was based on the complete street standards. These are 60-foot right of way. And right now, all these roadways are 50 feet, except for the Hoffman Road extension. So I have referenced the code where it says minimum 60 feet required for that kind of classification of the roadway. So those are the big ticket items, plus the storm drain is incomplete. If you have any questions.
So the going to 50 feet, I'm not sure it's a design exception request. Okay. I'm not sure why we would recommend a narrow roadway.
So for this particular subdivision, there's kind of a push and a pull between street cross sections and setbacks and lot sizing. This is RE1, and we have to have a 35-foot setback from the public right of way and a 9,000 square foot lot. And so that's kind of what's somewhat driving this. I think what we're going to do after this meeting is just request a follow-up with DOT and Park and Planning, and kind of, we're starting to look at this and just try to understand what the implications are and see if there's anything we can do on our end, and then we'll come up with some ideas and come back to you guys and talk to you about it.
Okay.
But that's what's kind of driving the 50-foot.
Yeah, like any site, it's tight. We're trying to achieve the number of units, and there are conflicts. The RE1 zone is a little bit of an unusual zone. We don't do a lot of work in it, and there aren't many sites zoned that way. So the 35-foot setback was, an eye-opener to me. I really didn't remember that being the case. So there is a lesser setback for a private road, interestingly. It's only 10 feet if it's a private road. So there may be some salvation there. So I don't know. Kate, what do you want to talk about, or do?
Is there anything else that folks around the table need to know?
No, and I just want to reiterate, I think we're trying to be strategic in our comments, given that you are accommodating this request for a road connection. We've sort of compromised with this alignment because you showed us two, even though the more direct one was where we started. And at this point, really our focus is on that one block where that terminus happens and how we can make that block work with the overall site geometry. There's already an alley that is introduced in that block, so we think maybe reconfiguring that alley to run parallel to the streets along it will solve a lot of the issues. We think that's one way to get to at least the layout concerns. And then the stormwater stuff and how that gets handled, especially along that frontage drive coming into the property and also in that park are kind of key priorities for us that we're trying to make sure we don't lose sight of as you guys go to the next stage.
So thank you for that, and thank everybody else for their comments. I think internally we went through everything with a fine-tooth comb over the weekend and again yesterday. And so
the 60-foot, I think a lot of the comments we can work to address in a way that hopefully is satisfactory to everybody involved to as much as we can. I think the big issue at this point is the 60-foot right away for us. And it's just trying to figure out how to incorporate that kind of given the law constraints. So as Bob and I both mentioned, we would like to just try to set up some time with you all after this meeting to kind of work through that. But we just need some time to do a little bit more analysis on the design before we sit down and talk.
There's a section in the code that talks about 4 ways you can reduce the right of way width. And you'll want to look at that and review that.
Do you want to set up a work session for next week or is that too
Yeah.
early?
I think so, yes. Yeah. I think our plan has always contemplated sidewalks on both sides of the streets and clearly accommodating the vehicles. Those are the 2 most important things. And then the design objectives, if you will, of complete streets is an issue, but I don't think it's as important as making sure pedestrians, bicycles, and cars can navigate it. So hopefully there's some options there, Rebecca, you mentioned. Where would we find those? I'm sorry, that's in the road
It's
code?
it's in the road code. I'll have to get I have it on paper that I can give it to you. I'll send it to you when I get back.
That'd be really helpful because I'm not the road code expert, but
I don't know if it's a road, I think it's actually chapter 50, so I'll send it to
okay.
you. I'll send you the chapter and everything.
while we're together, and we might need to follow up on this as well in another meeting. One of the issues that concerned us, I know your objectives in terms of site design and house layout and that sort of thing. We're familiar with those. Personally, I have a concern, even a problem with suggesting that the homes along Kings Valley Road front on Kings Valley, they're not going to have driveways there. That's not going to be allowed. And so if the front door is out to Kings Valley Road, but that's not where the driveway is, what it really is making the front of the house the back of the house. And I've seen homes where they have this, and it just, I wouldn't buy a house like that. I want, when people come to my house, I want them coming to the front door, not walking around the yard to get to the front door or coming in the back door. And so, if you look across Kings Valley Road, that's one of the reasons all those units have their backyards to Kings Valley Road. And I just think that's a logical way to do it, to make the yard usable and make the house attractive to the buyer and their guests. So we're probably going to want to push back on that concept a little bit. That's not to say some reconfiguration might not occur here, and then the other thing is, when we started looking at some of the options you were talking about, it looked like it was going to result in the loss of 4 units or possibly more, and we, for obvious reasons, don't want to go there. So I don't know whether we can get into it in more detail today or not, or whether that is, a separate meeting that, is tied with the transportation issues.
I think CPJ is going to look into that as well. So I think we'll have a holistic
Okay.
point of view when we sit down with them next.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, the unit orientation as shown, I understood that the units were fronting on Kings Valley Road, the ones that are shown on Kings Valley Road. The back is an alley, so is that a misunderstanding from what
No,
you're?
that's, yes.
That's what I'm
Located plan, yeah. No, take kind of plan.
So the 3 unit or the townhouses and the single family detached unit that is adjacent to those all front.
Right.
The one as you go plan south east is side to Kings Valley. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And then as you turn into this, and then as you kind of go up Kings Valley towards 27 on the left side, then it's obvious that those front street C internal to the site. So it's basically, we've got, I can't see, is it 3 units or 4 with the townhouses? That front, and then the one on below that is a side load, or a side that loads off of Street A when you come in the job.
So the way we were reading is, sorry,
No, go ahead.
the way we were reading is that the front doors are all on the road, and then some units have the driveways on the road, and others are rear loaded. So the ones along Kings Valley Road are rear loaded from the alley, right? That's what you were, okay, so that's what you're proposing.
If we we didn't really want to locate the townhomes there. That was, Plan B, if you will, that we would push to in the pre-preliminary. I personally, I thought the original plan was better, but it did put all the townhomes together in one place.
I mean, I think there might be a simple solution here, which doesn't break too many eggs, which is, the corner ones that have their sides. What we are interested in is having a presence of these homes onto Kings Valley Road. So oftentimes in these type of conditions where you have a side, you either do a wraparound porch or things of that nature that, have the porch turns the corner, so you have the front and the side, and that creates, a presence for the house on the street. If you do that on those 1, 2, 3 houses, 4 houses, then you can basically keep the houses where they are. I think the top 2 houses might need their driveways pushed away from Kings Valley Road, so the porch is going to be on that side, but it might be a simpler fix than I think maybe, Bob, what you're afraid of.
I'll leave that to the design people. The other somewhat related question, a comment about the alley, and I appreciate the desire not to have a view of a street up an alley. That would be a continuation of the street, if you will. At the same time, I don't think we would want to be living in a house that is directly looking at a street that's intersecting, because then every time somebody comes up the street at night, the headlights are right into the front of your house. So we've got a little bit of a conflict there, and need to figure out, if there's an alternative.
I think that's one area where we're gonna sort of push back and say that we definitely don't want this major Hoffman Drive connection that you're making at great expense to come and just dump out onto an alley looking into the backs of MPDUs. Like, I think that would be a very unfortunate view to create. So
You're back really far. I mean, and as a person, I don't think that you'd really want a house, a front of a house directly across from an alley, because again, you have those headlights, and I know you could probably avoid it with like a side, but you really don't want that. And what they have there is, what we ask for is an actual connection that intersects, and center lines intersect with each other. And so for us, this, the way that the location of the alley access onto from Hoffman is what we ask for most people to provide. So
clearly we need more discussion.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
let's talk that through. There's also a lot of grade here of that road coming down, so it's not a flat condition where you're just driving right into the living room of a house. So we just need to, I think, talk more and figure it out and work with DOT so we all are happy.
Yeah, to add on to that, that Hoffman Drive extension, that is pretty steep. So I would really like to see the profile before I can, approve anything on that extension.
Yes, and I think we made the same comment, Deepak. We had seen the profile for the other alignments. I think you need to see that on your submittal, but not for this one. So we need to compare apples to apples, and we need to see those side by side in order to make to back up our recommendation.
do you have any idea what the grade is on that road?
Engineers do. Bill?
Not off the top of my head, Kate, but I'm pretty sure we submitted the profile for that roadway.
Do not see him.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, we saw the profile for the other one, the old one, which went all the way through, but not for this one. I did not see anything for this.
If you
So
can
none
tell
of
us
the
the sheet number, that would be helpful.
Yeah, we'll make sure we get that to you. I think it was like 7 or 8% off the top of my head.
That's what I want to say too. I just didn't want to say something and be wrong, but it's around 7 or 8%.
Okay.
It's
So
a
it
hill
was
and
not
it
like-
curves, and so, it's not a straightforward thing where you're just driving and your lights are right into the living room of a house. And
What?
even the lots are graded, right? So even the lots are not flat. So there's
I
a
think
lot.
when you're coming up that hill, if you're coming up at an angle, they are going to be shining up into any house that's across the street. If you're talking about lights, I think the angle is going to make it worse, because once you do get up top, it does flatten out, because we have to flatten out before the intersection. because we can't come into that intersection at that percentage. So we have to flatten out to at least, I think, 2%
Yeah.
on that approach.
Right, and if they move that that alley access on, they're not gonna have another location for it. Because I mean, you don't want it too close to the intersection. You could potentially move to the right, but otherwise, there's no real good location for it. Like, this is an ideal location for us, for DOT.
So Rebecca, if obviously we are making comments on this block, just big picture comments, if the revised layout shows a north-south alley sort of running from top to bottom and no connection to the left-hand side, that we also
You could, you just have to make sure it's not too close to the intersection with Kings Valley and not too close to this one.
understood.
Yep.
Gotcha. I think an earlier version of our sketches, maybe it was with a pre-preliminary plan application that we put together, it was a north-south alley. It didn't have the L-shaped alley. So maybe it's just off the top. But we certainly can talk more.
Speaking of grade, one of the things that we'll want to talk about further, I think, is, you were mentioning I guess, Chris, you were mentioning the sidewalk down on the south end out to Kings Valley. There's a heck of a lot of grade there. And I saw in the diagram, you showed sort of a V shape or whatever implied, and that it would be a way to deal with the grade. But it still creates a grading problem, I think. And I'm not sure that that's where the real demand line would be, because the only way pedestrian movement from there is to go back to the north up towards Preakness Drive along our frontage. If I lived in this community and I wanted to go to the park, I'd go up Preakness and go through the Preakness community down their path. And that seems to be the desire line. So we'll look at that more, but there are some problems grading.
And just to piggyback on that a little bit, I mean, and I think it's specifically, it's along that lot. So I just don't know from an ADA accessibility standpoint, if we're going to be able to grade along the lot in such a way where it complies, but we'll look into that and see. But that was something we did talk about yesterday as well, just kind of maybe being a challenge for us.
Yeah, and a lot of it is also speaking to kind of that idea that Jeff was introducing with the sculpting the hill, so it's not just that kind of straight down, mound feel, so it's more of a natural feel. So that's kind of where it's getting to, just trying to sculpt things and see where. Ideally, it's ADA. If it can't work, then see some other alternatives.
Okay. I don't know what else, if anything, we can accomplish today. It seems that we need a follow-up meeting that would be a combination of planning, design people and transportation, really.
Are you proposing parking on the street?
We were not initially.
Okay.
Because
So
of the
that's probably
35
why
foot
you
setback.
reduce that's probably how you reduce the,
Yes.
Right.
okay.
Yeah, because these are 35-foot setbacks and they're gonna be 2-car garages. There's room for cars in the driveway, was the thought. All right.
Yep. All right. So you'll again arrange for us probably next week again. Does that?
Yes, Tuesday.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, this is Mark Etheridge real quick. If you're going to arrange a meeting, can I be involved in that as well? Because there's a lot of talk about moving stormwater around, and there's really not a lot of room to move stormwater around on this project as dense as it is. So I'd like to be involved as well.
Sure, Mark.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Good point. We didn't bring that up, but we had noted the same thing, Mark. Thank you for pointing that out. Okay.
Okay.
More management stuff.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you, folks.
Thanks,
And
guys.
Okay, thank
Rebecca,
you.
I appreciate you following up on what you were going to send us there. That this one? That was the other one.
That's this one,
This one.
the 4 exemption.
Yeah.
The right
That's
of
the
way.
zoning ordinance stuff.
I already forgotten.
Sorrento. I am the chief of the Intake and Regulatory Coordination Division, and this is the DRC meeting for Clarksburg Town Center. Your lead reviewer is Philip Estes, and the purpose of this meeting is for you to ask any questions you might have based upon the comments you received. The meeting is being live streamed and recorded. Philip is pulling up the plan right now, and once he does, he can highlight any of the major issues we should talk about, and then we can go from there, answering any questions you have. It's yours, Philip.
Okay. All right, thank you. That's the pull up the image of the preliminary plan. So we're looking at the project plan, preliminary plan, and site plan amendments for the Clarksburg Town Center. For this project, the applicant has elected to review this under the 2004 zoning ordinance under the RMX zone. And per the code, this is applicable to the development standards. New uses and use standards would be subject to the current zone, which is CRT. Planning has provided comments, which you've all received, about urban design, master plan conformance, density, uses, and environmental. Some of our significant concerns include just clarifying a density calculation, I think the gas station use, transportation, and then urban design comments focused on maximizing the Main Street vision. And other reviewing agencies have provided the comments as well. So I don't know, to make sort of most, you're Kate, right? Yes, okay. And make most efficient use of our time. Did you want to go through your pertinent comments, or we could just go around the table with agency comments?
Thank you. Before we get started on the comments, I just wanted to take a second. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Clarksburg Town Center. For those of you who are not, this plan has been around for a very long time, as you know. And we've worked very, very hard to come up with a plan that works not only from a financial perspective, but also worked for the community. And so what is shown on this particular plan, the streets are in, the pads are graded, everything else in the community that we've proffered is done. So 2 parks, master plan roads, connection between the east side and the west side, the changes to some community spaces, everything that we proffered previously is done. So for this particular plan, what happened was the pandemic basically exacerbated a bunch of the trends we were seeing for a while. And so the 206,000 square feet of office and retail has changed because you can't fill 206,000 square feet of office and retail out here. And so what we tried to do with this plan is keep all of the streetscape elements the same, keep all of the recreation facilities and community facilities the same, and just alter some uses of the buildings to make sure that the retail that is out here is as successful as it can be, and the town center is as vibrant as it can be. So that was the goal with this particular plan. Everything else that we had proffered back in 2015 out here is done. And so this is the last piece to finish this long ongoing community. So on that note, just want to give everybody a little bit of history and just how much work we've all put into this. Whatever comments you guys have, we're more than happy.
Okay. Well, then I guess we could start sort of with an overview. Jeff, maybe if you want to go highlight some of the urban design comments, I can pull up the drawings if you like.
We can work with what's on this.
Is this okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
The major comments were related to, I guess the biggest thing was, as Philip was mentioning, was the idea of really trying to promote this as a Main Street corridor, really trying to provide kind of a Main Street for Clarksburg. And so some of the concerns initially were, as you look at both entrances that would kind of access and feed into this Main Street, as it's laid out right now, the visibility is to the gas station. And then it's sort of to the back of house for the grocery. So really trying to provide means to screen that or minimize those views to that. So we provided comments that walk through all of this, and there are some sketches that are attached that show that as well. But one of the ideas was, I think it's parcel P, looking at the idea of perhaps shifting or expanding the retail down to that corner just to try to help screen a little bit the visibility of the gas pump as it's being shown on the plan, was one way of looking at that. The other is if you look at the other end closer to the grocery where there's a water feature and plaza, it's really trying to look at how can that building mass, which is shown as multifamily, be configured in a manner that helps to screen some of the visibility to the back of the grocery. So perhaps extending it out closer to the road, but at the same time, maybe look at exploring mixed use opportunities. So rather than just having it being purely multifamily, actually introducing some retail within there to help activate that plaza. And so it's sort of twofold. It helps to screen it, but then it also helps to really frame this public space and also improve that entrance. So the idea would be that both of these entrances going in feed into a really nice pedestrian-oriented mixed-use retail corridor that's supported with this grocery. What you'll see in the sketches, and not to get in too deep into each and every sketch that was there, but was looking at different studies, kind of looking at, okay, well, if the multifamily was here, perhaps retail could be shifted here. And so the different options kind of explore different ideas and thoughts about that. The other big piece is where the two multifamily buildings are that are on the north side, looking at attaching them. So I think it's building F and building G, rather than having them separated, actually connecting those and beginning to show that as a connected mass. The other comments really, no drive-throughs. We really don't want to see a drive-through coming off of this. This is such a short stretch of Main Street. Having a curb cut for a drive-through doesn't really seem to fit with that vision of a pedestrian-oriented Main Street. The other comments, some of them looked at shifting the grocery perhaps closer out to the edge and really trying to create an activated edge using that building mass. And then variations, perhaps retail could be here, but really the big picture comment was really trying to look at where there is multifamily, introducing opportunities for retail within that. And then where there is retail, as you're showing it, also creating meaningful, dedicated open spaces for people. So perhaps a plaza, something that there's a space for people to actually gather rather than just park and get out and then get back in. Actually trying to make this a place that people want to be and actually want to circulate and encourages them to spend time there. So broad view, we could get really deep into the nuances of each of the options, but that is by and large sort of the overall comments.
Yeah, and again, thank you for working on this for decades. We really appreciate that. And I think we certainly recognize the change in the market. So nobody on this table is expecting, hundreds of thousands of square feet of office to be introduced here. That's not a real proposition. And I think the challenge we recognize too is that there's not enough retail peanut butter to spread on the sandwich, right? There's two big blocks and you have a very limited amount of retail that I think you're willing to try to lease out, which makes sense. With the grocery store, this is probably the upper end of what you would be able to fill. Having said that, I think the challenge we are trying to reconcile here is that the intersection of Clarksburg Square Road and Overlook Park Drive is kind of the heart of all of this activity.
St. Clair.
St. Clair. I have the wrong, St. Clair. Yeah. So, and you have the library there, you have the open space there, and all the retail is off of it as currently shown. So what we're trying to explore with you is how can you organize the programmed elements in a way that corner in the top of where the street comes in and tees into that open space. That's the heart of this development in terms of the main street coming there. What are the uses on the ground floors of those buildings that sit there, so that that plaza that you're showing, the triangular space shaped space, how is that active? What is sitting on it? And how can we make sure that the energy of the retail is not separated from the potential of the public spaces? I think that's the biggest sort of challenge that we are trying to work with you on to solve here. And, the sketches were, I wouldn't take them with a grain of salt, they're very rough. But the idea is you have retail on one side and all the public spaces are sitting on the other side. How do you marry the two so that everything kind of comes together to create a really solid place without having to go and dip into a use like office or additional retail that's not going to be feasible. That's the problem and the challenge that I think we want to work with you on to solve. I hope Sandra stated that correctly.
I think all in all, I think we are aligned in terms of goals. We want to create a viable town center. We want to complete this community. So I think we're aligned in terms of goals. What we are suggesting, I think, reinforces what you're trying to accomplish. So we think that will make it a stronger town center. We think it will make it a more defined and active core, which is essentially what you're trying to do. That perspective, we're aligned. I was going just to add to what you said, Kate, and Philip, that as part of our review, we have been looking at the previous approvals. There's a long history of approvals related to this site, including the compliance plan that we're also evaluating and assessing as part of the history of this application and as part of our review. Did you have questions about any of the design comments before we move on to other comments?
So thank you for walking through those for us. I think that was helpful. And it's nice to know that we can kind of take them with a grain of salt. I understand what the objective is. You're trying to connect the retail energy to, the amphitheater and some of the other amenities that we have here. So I understand what the goal is. And so we just are going to need some time to go back and just kind of look at things. But again, I think we're going to want to set up some time with you all to kind of similar to what we did 2013, 14, but just kind of set up some meetings just to make sure that we all are comfortable with what we would propose.
Yeah, absolutely. That works.
I mean, there's a lot of very great aspects to this proposal. Trying to create a two-sided main street. The grocer is hidden behind retail. The parking is screened behind. But we support all that. We appreciate all that. I think it's more just trying to solve that one issue of how to create a place that's surrounded by the retail energy, so that truly behaves like a town center and not a place where people come and park and do the retail things and then leave without activating all the public spaces that you created over many years.
Okay, thank you. In terms of both the site plan and the preliminary plan comments, I think the outstanding comments that we had with that were just to clarify the density calculations. The cap for that master plan is 7 dwelling units per acre. And it came in at 7.19, but it wasn't clear if perhaps that was based on the gross square footage or if there was something removed from the calculation.
I think there may have been something removed or was an old calculation. We are looking into that because if you look at the total gross acreage of the site, we are under 7 units per acre. So we're looking into that and we'll be able to respond to that comment for sure moving forward.
And very good. And then the other comment we had was regarding the gas station use. It's been determined by our legal that any new uses proposed would be subject to the new zone, which is CRT. And in the CRT zone, gas station or filling station is allowed as a conditional use. So we just wanted to note that. And
I'll comment on that.
I know that that's probably not what you were wanting to hear.
Right, and that's, I mean, that's not just legal, that's what's spelled out in the zoning ordinance under the legacy provisions. That uses that were previously approved can be reviewed under the previous ordinance. But any new uses that are being proposed, in this case, the gas station, would be subject to the new. So.
I saw that comment in the DRC comments, and so I looked into it a little bit. I haven't finished my review. I'm familiar with the work this gentleman has done on that topic before, as well as David Lieb. And all due respect, I don't think that's accurate, okay? First of all, I don't think this is a filling station. If you look at the definition of a filling station in either the old zoning ordinance or the new zoning ordinance, this is not one. These are gas pumps that are accessory to the grocery store. So I don't think it's a filling station. But even if it were a filling station, I don't believe the zoning ordinance and the grandfather provisions say that it has to be approved under the new zoning ordinance as opposed to the old zoning ordinance. So I've seen Mark's email on this. I've seen David Lieb's email on it having to do with Burtonsville Shopping Center and Starbucks. And in that, I think that case, as I interpreted it, was kind of the flip side. And there, they were saying it could be put in, a new use put in under the old development approval. So anyway, I don't think we need to get everybody into it today, but that's something that we need to look at because I'm not sure I agree.
Okay, we can have that conversation. Continue that later.
Yeah. And as you surmised, the last thing we want to have to do is go through a conditional use application process for something that, you know, is, I think, very desired by the community, but the conditional use process, all due respect to our other county agency, is it's overwhelming. You know, whatever complaints you might hear about the planning process, they're exponentially greater with the conditional use, I think. So anyway.
Okay, great. One other comment for the site plan is this parking lot landscaping. If you could just provide us with an exhibit showing, because you're electing to use the new parking standards, which would apply also to the parking lot landscaping and screening. So just an exhibit showing the tree canopy of 25% coverage at 20 years growth. And also, if you could, to explore planting trees in all of the islands. There's some islands, just regular islands, and I think there's also stormwater management islands. So if it's possible to plant trees in those islands as well, that would be good. And final comment I have is regarding the outdoor illumination. The code limits illumination at 0.5 foot candles. This is in the comments, but it just appears that a couple of the townhomes, 36, 37, and 38, it may exceed that right there at the lot line. So if you could clarify that or adjust that. One other comment I see is I think on one of the red line sheets you show you're Xing out a historical plaque. Do you know what that is for?
So I don't know if you remember this from way back when. We have the Clark Family Memorial on the east side of the Stream Valley. And on the west side of the Stream Valley, the thought was we would have some historical plaques that would kind of seed you from this location to the memorial. I'm more than happy to add the plaques back in. We would just need some help in trying to figure out, and maybe it's working with the Historical Society. I know I still have a relationship with those folks. But the thought is with the office space going away and some of the other things that were attached to the plaques, we kind of thought that they may not be as desirable. But I don't have a problem with them per se. It's just we were wondering in this particular configuration if they were relevant moving forward.
Okay. maybe we can have, maybe I can talk with our historic preservation staff here.
On the call here?
Is Brian on the call? Brian Crane?
No, Brian Crane would be cemeteries.
No.
This is not the cemetery, this is just the historic plaque that was on the multifamily building, that was on the office building.
It was right by the office building.
Oh.
Yeah. And we could do it in a meaningful way. I don't have a problem with that. I just want to make sure that what we're doing is thoughtful and makes sense and kind of is well integrated.
Would it be appropriate in a different spot?
That's what I'm wondering, like, is there a way to connect it maybe to like the actual historic district versus kind of like this area, you know, is there a way we can kind of see it differently?
Okay. Okay, I think that's about all I have for preliminary and site plan. The other comments were just minor. We could move on to, should we go to transportation? Brett, do you have any comments?
Nothing major. The only comment I had was there's a side path to the, I guess that would be planned northeast. Sorry, I'm trying to orient. Yeah, northeast. So my only comment was to try and find a way to kind of orient that into the existing drive aisle that comes off of Overlook Park. So right now it just kind of exists in its own field, and that's pretty much it. But like for people that are coming from Burdett Forest, which is on the other side, to at least have some kind of a pedestrian connection. If they don't want to walk all the way down to St. Clair, at least that kind of provides a shortcut for them to get to the other retail sections.
Oh, so you're talking about from like the middle, like across the parking?
Yeah,
field?
it's not, it's kind of sort of shown on the plan. It kind of meanders off, but there's like about 11-foot side path that's just to the, that kind of parallels the drive aisle.
Oh, you mean the Greenway Trail?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah,
yes, okay, that's built.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, yes. So you want to try to integrate, just have connections from that into the, okay, understood. Thank you.
Okay, how about DOT?
Billy Whalen is the reviewer.
Hi, yes, this is Billy Whalen. I don't know if you've looked at the comments on page 3 of the preliminary plan, but our main comment is from the B amendment in June of 2015, there was a signal warrant analysis submitted, and our traffic section has reviewed that. And the signal is warranted at Stringtown and
St. Clair.
General Store St. Clair Drive or St. Clair Road.
So I've reached out, so our transportation planner on this, Billy, is retired. And we got helped by some of his subsequent folks that have taken over the project for him. I went back through all of my old correspondence. I went back through all of my old files. I found warrant analyses for some of the intersections along Clarksburg Square, but I wasn't able to find one down here. Do you have that where you can make that available to us? Or is there somebody I could reach out to at DOT that might be able to share that?
You can try Mark Terry. I asked him if he had the communication that went back and forth to any transportation review or transportation consultant. He said at the time he replied he didn't, and it was kind of right around the time I started with DOT, so I checked through all of my communication and nothing was forwarded to me, but I can dig deeper into it.
Let me try, and if I run into a couple dead ends, I'll let you know. I reached out to the traffic consultant that took over this case yesterday, so I'm sure he'll get back to me, but if he, by chance, because, the original person retired, if he by chance can't find it, I just wanted to see if there was a backup at DOT. So I'll reach out to Mark if I run into a dead end with David Samba, who's my contact. And if I find it, and if I get one, I'll forward it to you as well, so you have a copy.
Okay, great, thank you.
Sure.
All right, thank you. Moving on to fire and rescue. Fire and rescue.
I'm here. Do you guys have questions for me?
No question.
No.
All right.
Thanks, Maureen.
That's easy. Thanks, guys.
And let's see, we have,
I mean, we should just be focusing on any major.
yeah,
Comment.
actually, is,
I did have a question real quick, not to interrupt, but Doug, you wanted an impervious area exhibit. You said for the whole development. Can you elaborate? I mean, that's a fair amount. What are you specifically?
Well, I'm trying to get to two things here. One, we've never had an impervious surface exhibit for Clarksburg Town Center. With the Delta Amendment, it was briefly mentioned in the staff report that imperviousness was at 34%. That's all we've got. So what I'm trying to do is close the loop, but also secondarily, since there is a water quality plan required for this amendment, I've got to make certain findings under Chapter 19 for the board that things have, you know, been adequately addressed or as much as can be. Now, I understand this is the commercial center, everything is paved. I would be really surprised if imperviousness is below 95%. You know, but I've got to still have to make that finding. And I'm just trying to close the entire loop on the town center and give us a display. Now, I will caveat that this is not something that with typical impervious surface plans, we take it, we get board approval. We also then follow it with impervious surface agreement. I don't want to do that with this. But what I would like to have is an exhibit that says, okay, this is what an impervious surface is.
Yeah.
I was wondering how much of a stretch that request would.
It's a stretch, but I think we can get it done.
Thank you.
It's just we got to cobble a bunch of, we weren't involved in the project from the beginning, so we'll have to utilize some stuff that we didn't create, and there'll be some plus or minuses associated with the numbers for you. And
sure,
you know, to the extent that we can dial it in, we will. We may need some assistance from you on some other plans or things just to get a little more accurate if you think it's needed, but we can get there.
Just something ballpark is really, I'm not looking for, you know, accuracy out to the third decimal place. You know, we can get there.
Just a second.
Just a second.
I'm sensing from your comments that you want this more for documentation purposes than that you're not seeing a substantive problem here.
Right, we're not going to come back with this and say, okay, Elm Street, this, you're held to this period, you know. This is more for documentation. Now, I do have to make those findings for the water quality plan on the commercial center. And that's where we look at has imperviousness been reduced as much as possible, to be honest. Yeah, yes, it has. It's a commercial center. It's been approved for years. So.
That water quality plan is in for review, so we're not, in fact, we've already gotten review comments back and they were fairly minor. We're not expecting any hiccups there. We just wanted to be sure that we got through this process to be sure that we had the response back to DPS. I think we're in good shape.
okay. Only other comment that stands out to me is from Potomac Edison. Did you see that comment?
They are not the electric supplier up here.
Okay.
So that we're good there.
Okay, good. Okay, anyone else on the call or have any other comments or questions they would like to discuss with the applicant?
I just had one question. It wasn't clear from the drawings. What is that parcel to the right of building 6? I think it's parcel F or P. And that whole parcel to the south of it going to look like when it's all said and done, when this, because it sounds like this is the last thing we're doing. What does that look like? Because that's the entrance into this coming from the south as well.
And that whole parcel that kind of runs plan south to the east.
Yeah, plan south, and then that little parcel to the right of building 6.
So to the right of building.
Can you point? Are we all seeing what we're referring to?
Yeah, it's that whole section of the site that's
On the left
what
side
you're
of
going to see
the
when
road?
you roll right in.
So when you come in, there's a stormwater management
Mhm.
pond that's been there from the beginning of the project.
Right.
And that area there is going to be a handful of microbiome retention facilities. So they'll be landscaped and, fairly well maintained. If you're looking at that area now, the grade is going to come up significantly. And I'm going to get this wrong, but 10 or 12 feet from what you see out there today.
Okay.
Right now, it's being used as a sediment basin.
Uh-huh,
So there's a
yeah.
lot of conversion work that we need to do as development progresses. So, and then to the right of Building 6, you're going to have a outdoor sitting area. Right. And then adjacent to that, there's another small microbiome facility that'll be landscaped as well.
And then Plan South is all forest conservation area.
So is that going to be a mound after the regrading is done? Or it'll be a hole?
You'll have, coming off the parking lot, it'll slope down into the microbiome facilities, and then it'll slope back up to the edge of the road there. So all those microbiomes are going to be set down a little bit. So it's not really going to block visibility and things like that, if that's what you were.
Well, I was hoping it would block visibility into the parking lot.
Well, there's going to be some perimeter landscaping and stuff along, the edge of the parking lot there, but it's not forested, so it's not going to be that heavy screen that you're going to get parallel to Stringtown Road, where all of that is all forest conservation and then stormwater management. So that whole stream valley is heavily wooded. There's been a fair amount of work down in there, creating additional wetland areas and establishing the forest conservation areas and stuff like that. So that's all coming along into maturity.
Yeah. The sequence looks like coming from south. So after the forest conservation plan, stop and then stretch before you get into your two-sided Main Street environment. So we should discuss that, I think.
Were there any retaining walls along there? I can't remember.
There's a
I don't
wall on
see
the
it there.
east, or I guess it's really the north side that we've already built. You've got the road in, then you've got the Greenway Trail, then there's a wall there
Holding
on
the
that
trail.
north side.
Right.
Right, but
Right.
nothing, no retaining walls in the areas that we're talking. You've got the big head wall for the culvert that's under St. Clair, and then everything else is just generally naturally graded between the parking lot and St. Clair. I believe, and Nii can speak better to this, I believe we've got a wall around the little plaza area adjacent to Building 6, but that's there, and then that's really the only wall that's in.
It was meant to sort of address entry, so it was meant to look like a sort of a nice feature. It's right next to a nice outdoor space.
Yeah, this was definitely one of the areas that we are very interested in because it's the first thing you see as you come into the development into Main Street. So we definitely want to pay close attention how that is coming together and the relationship of that area to the rest of Main Street, to the other uses, to buildings. I think one of the sketches that we had put together showed buildings there. You might have seen, I can't remember if we labeled those residential or commercial, but we were just trying to say, why not extend the building massing around the corner so that it frames a little bit more the entry to the site? And that was the thought. That's what you see there. Just because we don't want the gas station to be the first thing as you as you come in, or even the parking.
Yeah, the only thing I'll mention, and obviously, work together, that area really hasn't changed. That's where stormwater has been planned for many years. The stormwater fund, right? So the only real addition, it's interesting because in that whole grocery block, there's not a whole lot of changes. You got the accessory use for the gas pumps, and then a little bit of, other minor tweaks just to get everything dialed in. But generally, there hasn't been much change other than, like Kate pointed out, for the office conversion to multifamily. So, so anyway.
You all good? Where? All right, thank you.
Anything else? Do we need to set up a meeting for follow-up or, yeah?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Don't know how to do that, but we can do that.
Do you want to have a meeting? I guess depending on the issues that we're trying to tackle, I know design is one of the topics.
Yes.
Obviously be there. And what other issues?
That's the big one. I
That's
think
the big
that,
one.
Bob, you can probably kind of go through with legal, some of the questions around,
Yeah,
or how do you want to handle that?
I think I'll talk with Mark and maybe legal offline about the
I think
issue.
both Emily Vyas
Yes.
and Mark Beal have been involved in this
Yeah.
discussion, so we
Yeah.
want to speak to the team and then obviously.
Okay, so if it's okay, I'll just follow up with them independently and
You think Philip has been.
oh, sure, okay.
So you had an email from Mark, you met Matt probably. Do you have an email from me?
Notes of a phone conversation, I think.
That's from DPS, it may need to be.
Yeah.
From there.
Okay. Well, I'll
Keep that in mind.
Yeah, okay.
Different hat on these days.
Yeah.
For the post DRC meeting, it's concerning urban design, mostly. Okay.
That for a work session next week, or did you want? Boy, we're gonna have very busy
Quality time.
just urban design, is that what you said, or?
I think for now.
Okay.
How does that get effectuated? Is there, I know you guys have a block of time that you have set aside next Tuesday. Do we vote for a time or are you scheduling a time? How do we do that?
Emily will reach out to you with a scheduled time.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
on the screen the proposed plan. This is just north of the ICC, between there and Olney Town Center, on the west side of the road. Currently on the site, there is a barn structure near the back, and the Olney Antique Mart and its associated stores. There's a crab shack that kind of goes across the property line back here, and a few other outbuildings. So this plan will the retail uses are going to remain at the front of the site, but all the other buildings will be removed, and this new daycare center will be built at the back of the site. And the gray area around it is mostly the playground area for the various ages of children, and some screening. There was some questions that we had when reviewing this as to whether the entire site is the conditional use site, since part of the site will remain as a retail use. So there will need to be some clarification made at the time of conditional use plan as to whether the entire site is being used as a conditional use. It may not be possible, since part of it does still have the antique store. And this plays into the number of children you can have, because you need to have 500 square feet per child. And right now that number of children is calculated based on using the whole site. The hearing examiner can allow down to 250, I think. So if you do plan on using part of the site, you may still be able to get the same number of children, but you would have to justify why the 500 square feet number, why you would use a number lower than that per child in this case. A few questions we also had about the parts of the parking lot that will remain gravel, and if the entire site is being used to calculate the student rate, then the entire property may need to be improved and not left as gravel. This will be something that we would need to work out a little bit in a little bit more detail as the conditional use plan goes forward. A few issues about the parking lot setback in the residential zone. 10 feet instead of the 8 feet for the screening for the conditional use. So we'll also need to have some conversations to determine the appropriate amount of setback for those parking facilities. But we provide the comments. I don't know if you saw the separate document that had the zoning issues that I just outlined. So now it's your turn to ask any questions for any of the review comments you may have seen.
And just for clarity, I'm Peter Chu with Prosperity US, representing the owner. Ernie Marcus, our counselor of real estate. But I'm going to turn it over to Chris, our land use attorney. If you want to start, Chris.
Sure, and I think that I'm going to do some passing it over to Morris Ritchie, who are our civil engineers, so we can get right into the issues. And I think my first question is, Courtney, do we have the document that was just referenced about? I know we had the separate plan with the zoning summary, but I wanted to make sure we saw the document with the question about the parking setback.
No, I did not receive that. So if that can be resent, that would be appreciated.
It's part of the zoning comments document that I uploaded into ePlans.
Okay. I'll have to recheck. I did not see that initially.
So yeah, so we will have to take a look at that, and we may have some questions probably after the time frame of this meeting about that once we get a chance to put our eyes on it. Just to kind of back up and explain what the concept plan is showing. We do have a retention of the existing antique mall structure on the front, as was noted, and I think along with that, some of the existing parking that is a gravel lot. That structure and that use, I believe, are both non-conforming. So however we need to set that up with an application moving forward, if we need to delineate sort of a separation between the existing portion of the site,
the existing improved portion of the site and the conditional use portion of the site. I think that would be something that would be helpful to clarify for us so that we know that we're approaching this in the right way from the outset. And so I guess that may be a starting point for this discussion.
I mean, it sounds like something, I mean, it's kind of a little deeper than just DRC. It's trying to delineate where the conditional use, I mean, this should be something we should sit down afterwards and have a chat about.
Okay.
That's my
So
opinion. I mean, we've only got so many minutes.
we can make a note that that's a follow-up sort of technical point about how to present it. There's a similar issue with, this property has to go through subdivision. And so I think the idea of, I think our analysis is suggesting that it would stay one lot when the preliminary plan comes in, but I think that issue may be connected to the conditional use issue as well. So we should probably plan a follow-up to sort of discuss and confirm the right approach to those two things, as well as, and I don't know if this is something that planning staff might be able to advise on. This is a situation where the applicant has already purchased the property, so they don't have a contract for sale or anything. The owner would be the applicant. And so, many times conditional uses come through in sequence with a conditional use first and a preliminary plan to follow, mostly for a contractual basis. So I think in this case, I don't know, we're interested in the idea of a concurrent submission, understanding that, the reviews may need to hold up waiting for the hearing examiner to act. And I don't know if you all may be able to provide some insight on that process in today's meeting, or if we should put that on a second follow-up as well.
I would like to put that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem is that we need to know the use in order to look at the preliminary plan. So that's usually why these go separate. It's not necessarily the ownership.
But Chris, this is Robert. It's not necessarily the ownership, but we have been having discussions with the hearing examiner about how a conditional use and a subdivision could go concurrently. But right now that hasn't been, I don't think we have anything memorialized on that yet, because okay. I think the approach we've always taken is, how do you do a subdivision where it's asking you for a use that is conditional or it's not approved yet. So it's a little bit of a chicken and egg, but we are having those discussions right now with the hearing examiner.
Okay, so depending on when we bring this forward, that may be another one that we continue to kind of coordinate with you all about to see if there's an approach that makes sense to do that. That might be a little different than what's happened in the past. Why don't we jump into kind of our technical questions so that we can make efficient use of our time? And Courtney, I'm going to hand it over to you. And I think you've already bulleted out what we want to hit on.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. So I guess first, I just want to thank all the reviewers who provided comments. There was very good feedback. There were a couple of items we did just want to touch on. The first regarding the comments we received from Fire and Rescue. Just want to acknowledge that we have run a truck turning analysis for a 46-foot fire truck. And based on with the current layout, that truck can circulate through the site. So that's something that we can provide with our.
Hi, this is Marie. So Montgomery County actually has a specific design vehicle. It's actually 47 feet long, so I already know you're using the wrong truck. Okay. The kicker is our steering lock angle is 33.2 degrees. So that's, if you don't meet the minimum radii that I've laid out for you, you're not going to get the truck around the site. Those radii meet the turning movements of that truck. In fact, I no longer accept auto turn for movement analysis because meeting the radii has addressed any subjective arguments from applicants at this point. I'm super happy to get on a call with you guys offline and we'll work through what needs to happen. But I can guarantee the truck that you used is not going to accomplish what has to happen in Montgomery County.
Understood. Thank you.
Yep, of course.
All right, then one of the other items that we were curious about, let's see, the county transportation. There were some from a Ms. Brenda Pardo, there were some comments regarding dedication of right-of-way along Georgia Avenue. And am I able to share my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I have a, can everyone see that? It's an aerial exhibit.
Yes.
Excellent. So the subject property is here outlined in red, and Georgia Avenue right-of-way is also delineated in red, and the right-of-way width along the property's frontage of Georgia Avenue here is just shy of 200 feet. I just want to clarify, obviously that's in excess of the 150 feet that was recommended. So I just want to clarify that that is acceptable and that no additional dedication would be required.
Right. Do we need dedication?
I don't believe so.
I think that the plans didn't clearly show the dedication, so what we want to see is on the plan, you actually need to show the, cross-section of the existing roadway and show the right-of-way and show what's opposite on the roadway on the plans. So.
Understood. Okay. There was also a comment regarding a trail or a breezeway, I think was the term. There exists a trail just north of the property that terminates at the intersection with Emory Church Road and then crosses. This is like a service lane that parallels the main line of Georgia Avenue. That trail terminates here, crosses that service road, and then continues as sidewalks on either side of Georgia Avenue. I wanted to get a little more clarification on where that trail would be required or what the recommendations would be, considering there are pathways and such along Georgia Avenue today.
It's a breezeway side path.
It's a side path. So this is Brett Brown of County Transportation. So that was my comment. So there isn't, like you said, there's an existing side path that heads north on Georgia Avenue past. There's a shopping center to the north.
Right.
My comment, this is the comment I also made at the pre-app meeting, was to tie in an additional sidewalk that actually connects to the property. So one of my additional comments adding on to that was that I wanted some kind of an internal connection from the building through the parking lot. Aside, and it's fine if it's 5 feet if it's internal, but once it gets to that frontage road on Georgia, it would have to be 6 feet, and it would also have to tie into the side path. That was my only comment for that. That makes sense, hopefully.
Yes, it does. And actually, that leads me into my next question about, was that, I'm sorry, Mr. Brett Brown who was just speaking? Yes. Okay, yes. Excellent. So there were a couple of comments that we received. Let me see if I can pull them up here. This was the plan markup, and there were some other written comments, and really just looking for some clarification. It was a little tricky to follow, but between the markup and the written comments, it sounds like you were recommending that we shift the building and reconfigure the parking lot. And I just need a little clarification on what the intent of these revisions is so that we can try to understand how best to address them.
Sure. So I'll start with shifting the building. So, I mean, the site itself is fine. It's surrounded by HOA property. Where the playground is right now, that's the only section that abuts a residential property. And just kind of knowing similar projects, I know the neighbors will more than likely complain about some of the noise. I know they're just little kids, but even then, I can almost be 100% certain that they will complain. So that was why I recommended shifting the building back to the southern property line. The only issue with that is that you would still have a portion of the playground abutting at least that property in the corner by the I forgot what address that is, 177 something like that.
This property here, yeah.
Yeah. So that's really the only issue, is that it would still touch at least one of the properties, but at least if you shift the building back a little bit to the property line, you may be able to kind of prevent some of the complaints that more than likely will happen. As far as some of the markups, and I'm sorry, I know I was drawing on a mouse, so I know it looks a little like the chicken scratch, but what I was trying to envision, so again, back to the pre-app meeting, I wanted some of the sidewalks to actually tie into the exterior of the building along the frontage road. my imagination is that if, someone is parking in the parking lot closer to Georgia, if they're pushing a stroller, there's no way that they're going to push it through those drive aisles. It's just not safe. So my comment was to at least invert the parking that you see to the north and then to the south. Invert that so you create your own drive aisle and then create a sidewalk from the building that terminates at that little point right there. It'll just connect up through between the parking lot and between where the dumpster corral is, and then you would just have something that would connect out to Georgia Avenue.
Okay, I see. So your comments weren't necessarily related to the way the parking itself was flowing, the vehicular flow through the site. It was more related to creating a pedestrian connection that was safe. Okay, understood.
I mean, the only kind of circulation comment I had was just making it a one-way rather than a two-way. But that was about it.
Okay. Just in response to shifting the building, that is something that we have examined. We heard that from, I think, a couple of reviewers. But right now, this is the best design that we feel is appropriate to meet the needs of the site and the user. We have area provided for screening and buffering adjacent to those residential users or residential dwellings to the south. But we hear your concern. So let me see here. We talked a little bit about
kind of double down on what Brett was saying about the play area adjacent to residential neighborhood. You will get a comment under that, and you will have to make those findings as part of the conditional use. So don't take it as lightly. You will get comments, you will get consideration from the hearing examiner if any of the neighbors do come out and say, why are you putting this play area next to my house where I have to hear it? I work from home, I work nights, etc. It will be an issue, and it has become an issue, and it may extend to the point of where you will be required to do a noise analysis, even though children noise isn't subjected to a noise analysis. The hearing examiner has required that on other applications. This is going to be a big issue at the hearing examiner. It's not right now, not a concept, but when you get to the conditional use, this play area, how many kids you have outside, what the schedules are, how you're going to mitigate for that, are all going to be under heavy scrutiny because of this use at this location. And it will be something that would be considered non-inherent adverse because it's not the site and it's not the use, it's where you're choosing to put the outside play area on that site. So understand that going into the conditional, we're trying to lead you to a smooth path through the conditional use process.
I'd like to get a clarification on that if I can, just because I appreciate all of that. I'm trying to figure out what you just all said sounded like the position of planning staff. The written comments did not translate with all of that. And in fact, the comment about the location was coming under transportation review. So, in the spirit of trying to use the concept plan to avoid future issues, I think it would be really helpful. Is that the planning staff's position on this issue that the building location should change? Or are you saying if you receive comments on it, then it's going to become something? Because I'm kind of hearing both things.
I don't want to speak for the packager, but I'm going to speak in general terms. It has been planning staff's kind of general principle that child noise is not a regulated noise and that it's not detrimental to a neighborhood. However, the hearing examiner has regularly said that's not her belief or their belief, and that they have had comments and conditions associated with outdoor plays above and beyond what we think as a planning staff. So it falls between many different areas. It happened to be here because that was the comments, or once it was made, we didn't feel like it was necessary to make the comment again. So I would say, please ignore where it came in the comments. Just understand that the comment is going to come into effect, not about the building location necessarily, but about the play location. And the movement of the building was related to you're putting the outdoor play area next to the only abutting residential uses on this site. And that's going to come up at the conditional use. So it's a comment. It's not necessarily going to be a kill a deal for us, but I think you're going to be setting yourself up for a longer road at the hearing examiner.
It's something to be aware of. That's we're just
Exactly.
flagging something for you to be aware of, not to be surprised later if this community comes out and complains about child noise, historical background, and other cases. Lead us to believe that if that happens, the hearings examiner may require some other considerations from you. So,
And Courtney and Chris, I think that this is, we've looked at the layout because really, first thing our team saw, right? Because I think that it's a kind of a multifaceted concern. One, if you shift the building back, which we had looked at, Ernie, who's our screen guru, was one of the ones early off saying we got to show screening. The concern is being able to get the proper amount of playground, because with Primrose, that's one of their big things is, the amount of exercise play area for the kids, for the number of students. But I think that also, Courtney, ties back in where we were saying that we would potentially lose a significant portion of the play area, has to do with parking setbacks, and that potentially relief in that area up against that HOA, BG right away, maybe kind of that, how they're all intertied, correct? Like if we can get more of a relief potentially where the setbacks are, or where the right of way is to the north, then that may allow us to potentially shift and then be able to domain but they're kind of tied together that way.
Yeah, so it just isn't an issue. We want you to be aware of it, and we want to know where the concern's coming from. It's not necessarily the building itself, it's the placement of the play area.
Yeah, we saw that early on. We've run several analysis, and I think, again, and maybe that's something we flush out, and again, in one of the follow-up meetings, is that with the parking, the setback, we are going to look for parking, this drive aisle setback relief. Is that correct, Courtney?
Parking setback.
Parking setback.
Relief. That's
And so, and how that ties in with drive aisles may be able to get us to that medium where we need to be.
Good. We're over time, so are there any last questions?
Actually, no, I think that covers all the main items that we needed some clarification on. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you, everybody.
Great,
Thank
thank
you.
you.